Well done, Tilk.
It is my honor to serve Lord Ball.
Yes, it is. But generations from now, they will speak of Master Tilk of Chulak, first Prime of Baal, first leader of the free Jafar nation.
Hey, welcome to another video. So today we're going to be going into the Goa'uld Ball. But before we begin, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, join the Sith Citadel Discord, links in the description, and consider becoming a join member to further support the channel. Otherwise, let's jump straight into it. So Ball was a Goa'uld and one of the leaders of the Trust, becoming one of the last System Lords. Once an Underlord in the Great Goa'uld dynasty, Ball left Ra's service and rose to a position of power among the System Lords in his own right. After the fall of the Goa'uld at the hands of the Jaffa Rebellion, Ball was the only known surviving System Lord and became determined to rebuild his power base. He succeeded somewhat with his clones, but over time they were all killed, with the last being extracted by the Tok'ra. The real Ball was finally killed by Colonel Cameron Mitchell, who set an ambush for him when he tried to alter history. So, first seen during the Second Goa'uld dynasty, Ball was originally one of Ra's prominent underlords in service to him on Earth, where he was thought of to be the son of El, who was, in actuality, Ra by all the Canaanites. It was in this role that he oversaw many cultures' development of an agricultural system, the Canaanites and the Phosians among them. Ball's influence spread throughout these cultures so much that he was known over the entire Mediterranean basin, and eventually most of the planet. He was rarely seen to be a kind overseer, however, and indeed, whenever his people failed to meet his strict food production quotas, he very often issued orders for the mass sacrifice of human lives. Though these measures led to overall prosperity for both the Goa'uld and the people, it came at the expense of many people, and so it perhaps came as no surprise that Ball was one of the first Goa'uld to encounter rebellion among his people, though it was to a much smaller scale than Ra's later rebellion. A few smaller villages abandoned worshipping him, and so, for their pride, Ball struck them down. It was during the time that the Goa'uld ruled Earth that he was sent to Kenai under the name Re'amin the Thunderer to kill its ruler, King Yam. When he fell from the favor of the Goa'uld, he cast Yam's body into the ocean on the planet and erected a floating city, Tisban, on the site of his death. This marks the beginning of the Kenai's people's enslavement to the Goa'uld. However, the people of the planet eventually rose up against Re'amin, using his own technology against him and forcing him to flee the planet. During this time, Ball was able to use his gravity technology to create black holes while using an anti-gravity device of ancient design as a shield, so that he wouldn't be affected by them. After he was overthrown, he took the power source of his shield with him, but left the rest of the technology behind, fleeing to his fortress world. He was forbidden from returning by the other System Lords, as they feared what he could do with the shield and anti-gravity technology at his disposal, and so he placed the shield's power source in a shrine on his fortress world, and while he continued experimenting with gravity technology, it was on a much smaller scale. And sometime after this, while the Goa'uld still ruled Earth, Ball was temporarily killed by Mott and then resurrected to a sarcophagus by his sister, Anat. After the fall of the Second Goa'uld dynasty, Ball was one of the first to oversee that the Tari would one day rebel, and so left the planet for the stars, earning him the wrath of his former master Ra, and causing him to be kicked out of the Sun God's inner circle. Despite this setback, Ball managed to maintain control over several Jaffa, who had been loyal to Ra, and so was able to carve out a small niche for himself within the ranks of the System Lords. Though not entirely loyal to Ball, these Jaffa served him out of fear for his wrath. For even though they knew that Ra's wrath on them would be terrible if he managed to defeat Ball, Ball presented a more immediate threat to them. In addition to this, Ball did not hesitate to make examples out of anyone who betrayed him for their former lord. Following the Earth Rebellion, Ra's attention was drawn to Ball, whom he was able to defeat repeatedly until, in desperation, Ball turned to Sokar, ironically fulfilling that Earth's belief that he was indeed Baalzebub, the ancient of Satan. Having been well aware of Sokar's enmity toward Ra, Ball offered him a contingent of his Jaffa, several having in fact been a servant of Ra at some point, to contend with Ra on the field of battle. Although Sokar's forces were more than sufficient to deal with Ra on their own, Ra's former forces provided a unique insight into the workings over their former lord's tactics, and so proved extremely valuable to Sokar. In exchange for his help, Sokar took Ball under his wing for a time, aiding him in the struggle to survive against their mutual enemy. This alliance stood for generations, during which time Ball took advantage of Sokar's help, using both his own and his new master's forces to carve out a significant kingdom among the planets of the Milky Way. Because many such gains were made with the help of Sokar's Jaffa, Sokar considered the territory to be his, though he rarely pressed this issue and simply left Ball alone. Concentrating on his own war with Ra, Ball continued to pay tribute and give respect to Sokar for the course of his servitude, as well as providing a buffer against Ra's forces with his ever-growing territory, allowing Sokar to concentrate along a narrower frontier. Ball could not hide his true intentions forever, though, gradually subverting the Jaffa that Sokar left him to the point that he commanded their true loyalty. He eventually became content that he would be able to contend with the forces of Ra without Sokar's aid. Ball broke off his servitude to Sokar and declared himself the sovereign ruler of his sector of space. Sokar immediately tried to recall his Jaffa from Ball's service, but was met with no answer, and sent 2 of his fleets to reclaim the territory, which he believed Ball had stolen from him. Having learned of his attack, Ball made a daring gambit. When Sokar's fleets arrived in the 2 systems controlled by Ball, they were met with only 2 Hatoks each, as Sokar's fleets closed in to attack the ships. Ball unleashed his plan and used the Hatok to cause the system's stars to go supernova, destroying everything nearby, including themselves and 60 million inhabitants on the worlds. Quickly deciding that the price of war with Ball was too high to pay, Sokar and Ball agreed to have a peace treaty so that they could focus on their prime opponent, Ra. For centuries after the truce remained, both of the Goa'uld fighting against Ra rather than amongst each other. Though the war rained heavily on Ball, he managed to get himself into a position of power, and eventually became a system lord in his own right. Ball's war with Ra drew on until it reached a point where the attrition rate became unbearable for both, and so the 2 agreed to a ceasefire, though they still remained enemies at heart. Despite this, the 2 system lords continued to inflict covert raids over the other, as well as attacking each other through politics rather than force. These actions continued for more than 1,000 years until, in what apparently was a freak accident, Ra was no more. Unknown to the system lords at the time, Ra was killed by Colonel O'Neill and Dr. Jackson, who had used transportation rings to send an enhanced nuclear warhead on board his ship after a rebellion on Abydos. Though the Goa'uld did not know the truth behind the sudden death, Ball was quick to swoop in and claim much of Ra's disarrayed territory before Apophis was able to take control of the majority of it. He used this new territory to parlay his way into a dominant position among the system lords, gaining even more power than he had previously. When the system lords held a conference following the deaths of Apophis and Kronos, Ball seemed to function at first among equals, conducting the meeting. When Osiris appeared on behalf of Anubis to petition the system lords to accept him back, on the condition that Anubis would, in turn, destroy the Tari, Ball was one of those who voted to restore him to the state of system lord. What most of the other system lords did not know was that this was simply a ploy to learn more information about his potential foe. However, this very act earned Ball the eerie view, an enmity which had previously only manifested in minor tension. This resulted in open hostilities. The Tok'ra had at least one operative, Kanan, in Ball's service, though. When Kanan was discovered as a spy, his host was damaged so badly that he had to seek another. When Kanan's symbiote was implanted in Jack O'Neill, he went to Ball's outpost in order to save Ball's Lotar, Cheyenne, who had become involved with. Ball's Jaffa were able to capture O'Neill before he was able to complete the mission, however, though Kanan left him so that Ball could not retrieve the information of the Tok'ra from him. Ball tortured O'Neill endlessly, killing him many times and bringing him back to life in order to gain the information that Kanan had left in his mind. However, when SG-1 informed you that Ball had been conducting weapons research on the planet, he sent a fleet which destroyed the facility and thus freed O'Neill. Unknown to Ball, his loyal underlord Mott was plotting against him, having seized control of P4S-237 100 years previously after Ball abandoned it. Believing that its Naquita mines had run dry, Mott planned to use the situation to help gain favor with Anubis, and power as Ball had fallen out of Anubis's favor with his defeats by Lord Yu. With the help of the villagers, SG-1 defeated Mott and killed him, saving Ball from his plans, unknown to Ball himself. Anubis subsequently failed in his attempt to destroy the Tari, and moved against the other system lords, demonstrating an impressively powerful fleet, which only the combined fleet of the system lords could even hope to take on. Though Yu was originally given the position to lead the alliance of the system lords' forces, his growing senility left him unable to do so, and so Teal'c and Ashu convinced Ball to assume control of the fleet and lead the war against Anubis. With Anubis in the atmosphere of Langara causing his shield to be weakened, he attacked and destroyed Anubis's mothership, but Anubis escaped in his escape pod. A short time later, he conquered the planet Erebus, and his Jaffa captured Braytak and Ryak. The camp was freed by SG-1 and Rachnar. After the fall of Anubis, Ball took over most of Anubis's former holdings, including the Coal Warriors and the Asgard beaming and hologram technology, so that he could wage war on the other system lords in order to become the most powerful of them. This led the other Goa'uld into a failed attempt to negotiate with the Tari for their support against Ball. When SG-1 was trapped in Anubis's base on P2X-887, he used the opportunity and lied to General Jack O'Neill and claimed to have captured them. He offered a trade, SG-1 for Camulus. O'Neill eventually agreed, and Camulus was turned over to him, with his supposedly rigged ZPM to assassinate Ball. This failed as O'Neill gave Camulus a dead ZPM, and it was later stated that Ball killed Camulus. Following Malak's death on Haktil, Ball claimed his domain and forces as his own. Ball quickly began to conquer the other system lords using Anubis's forces, and within a year of the system lords had been reduced to 3 others, all unable to fight him. However, at some point, Anubis managed to return and secretly retake control of his forces from Ball. Ball was forced to serve under Anubis, much to his displeasure. At this point, Ball began to style himself Supreme Commander of the Goa'uld Empire. Secretly, however, he was serving Anubis. As a result of his advance, many system lords retreated to the planets they had once ruled, but abandoned to use as strongholds and hideouts. Among those were Ares, who tried to retake Arkan's world, but was killed by Jack O'Neill, who destroyed his Hatak with the Time Jumper, presumably leading to Ball absorbing Ares' territory too. Ball's advance against the other system lords was stopped only by a long-anticipated invasion of the Replicators into the Milky Way galaxy. The Replicator armadas, led by Replicator Carter, quickly overwhelmed and destroyed the Goa'uld system lords, and Ball found himself fighting a losing battle against the invaders. When knowledge of an ancient superweapon capable of destroying all life in the galaxy was discovered on Dakara, Ball secretly assisted Replicator Carter's original human self, Samantha Carter, and Sam's father, Jacob Carter, in modifying the weapon along with the DHD associated with Dakara's Stargate, destroying all replicators in the galaxy. Ball then moved in to take back Dakara when rebel Jaffa stormed his ship, forcing him to beam away. This effectively led to the end of the Goa'uld Empire, as one of their gods fleeing proved to all Jaffa that the Goa'uld weren't the gods they claimed to be. Even when the replicators were destroyed, Anubis still intended to claim the superweapon for himself, and use it to destroy all life in the galaxy. Anubis allowed Ball to live so that he may bear witness to the end of all galactic life. When Anubis's plan was foiled by Dr. Jackson and Oma Dasala, Ball was left as the only known surviving system lord, the others having been killed by the replicators, and Anubis being contained by Oma Dasala. With his power base gone following the destruction of the system lords and the rebellion of the Jaffa, Ball needed a place to hide. Fleeing to Earth, Ball set himself up as a businessman and took control of the Trust, at the same time using Asgard cloning technology to make a series of clones of himself. He also planted an aquila bomb in the building in Seattle and threatened to blow it if Stargate Command and the Jaffa tried to kill him. They attacked anyway, and the building was beamed into space, and one of these clones was caught and executed by Garrick and his Jaffa. The real Ball and an indeterminate amount of clones escaped, allowing them to institute a series of plans to regain their power base. Later, Ball managed to regain an army of recruiting Jaffa, largely through the use of brainwashing. One of Ball's clones initiated a scheme to take control of the Jaffa High Council to prevent their rise to democracy with his brainwashing technology, turning key members of the Jaffa High Council against the idea of democracy. At the time, Ball merely claimed that he was doing this to provide strong leadership in the shape of himself to aid the Jaffa against the newly emergent threat of the Ori, but Vala, whom Ball had previously known as Katesh, later opinionated the subversion of the Council was done to gain control of the Dakara superweapon, using it to destroy all life in the galaxy, apart from Ball and his slaves. This would have caused the Ori to lose interest in the galaxy, though Ball indicated this to be the case, saying it wasn't a very original plan. The scheme was foiled, and the clone was killed by Teal'c. Ball also planned to rebuild his empire by using Asgard transporters to steal Stargates from other planets and hide them using a method developed by Nerus, Ball's former servant who had defected to the Ori and was captured by Stargate Command. His plan was foiled when Nerus returned to Ball and accidentally downloaded a virus into one of Ball's Hawtalks. The Stargates were then beamed off the Hawtalk by the newly built Earthship, the Odyssey, and the Hawtalk, along with several of Ball's clones, were destroyed by the Lucian Alliance. Later, Ball flew an Alkesh to Earth and was shot down by F-16 fighting Falcons. He was captured and taken to Stargate Command. He was interrogated by SG-1 and told them his clones had turned on him, and the SGC needed to capture them because they had knowledge of the Sangreal. He planted locator beacons in all of them, and they were using the tracking system on the Alkesh to capture them. After all the clones were captured, Malcolm Barrett, who was brainwashed, helped Ball escape. He forced Lieutenant Samantha Carter to give him an ancient list of Stargate addresses, and they used the locator chips, which in close proximity to one another amplified the signal they sent out, and they were beamed out. When he discovered the existence of Merlin's anti-Ori weapon, that could not only destroy the Ori, but the Ancients as well, one of the Ball clones found the planet where the weapon was located. His ships could not locate it, so he had to come by Stargate. However, the puzzles made the Ascended Ancient Morgan Le Fay made it impossible for Ball to reach it. His Jaffa had abandoned him, trying to find a way to free him from a force field. He was then forced to work alongside SG-1 and Adria. He was transported to the tomb of Mirrodin when the Ancient was awakened, who in his days likened Ball to Mordred. Ball attempted for the remainder of the time to find a way to dial out from the planet Stargate, which was locked into a random system that beamed the occupants of Mirrodin's tomb to random worlds in a closed-gate system to prevent discovery by the Ori. When Adria discovered the location of the world, Ball was stunned by the Ori commander with his stun weapon. His fate afterwards is unknown. It's possible that Ball was either killed or stranded on the planet. With the Ori making such advances into the Milky Way galaxy, Ball devised an ingenious plan. He intended to capture Adria and take her as a host, by ambushing SG-1's plan to capture the Orisai. Upon capturing her, Ball sent a message to his clones to meet to discuss the situation. Once they arrived, he beamed canisters of symbiote poison onto the camp, killing his clones. After implanting himself into Adria, SG-1 boarded his Hawtalk and killed another clone. Ball offered to help SG-1 in driving the Ori army out of the galaxy, saying that the Ori were indeed dead. However, SG-1 contacted the Tok'ra, who removed Ball from Adria, presumably killing him, but not before he released his symbiote toxin into her. Lieutenant Colonel Cameron Mitchell also expressed some doubt whether or not Ball was truly dead, fearing that one or more of the clones may have survived. At the time of the Atlantis expedition's encounter with the rogue Asgard Fenrir, the Tari and Free Jaffa Nation were planning a joint attack on one of Ball's bases. A Free Jaffa Nation fleet in the Odyssey gathered at Goa'uld in preparation for this attack, forcing John Shepard and Rodney McKay to meet the Odyssey at a planet in order to access the Asgard computer core. Despite these deaths, both the real Ball and at least one clone survived. The clone was ultimately tracked down through its tracking device, the true Ball apparently being the only Ball capable of removing his device. Taken to the Tok'ra homeworld to undergo an extraction, the clone warned SG-1 and General Jack O'Neill that they had made a terrible mistake, as the real Ball had a failsafe in place in case such an eventuality. Despite the clone's warnings, the extraction ceremony proceeded without incident, and Ball's symbiote was extracted and died after the Tok'ra elder smashed the container holding it. Ball's host survived the extraction, and Vala planned to help him adjust. At the same time, the real Ball traveled back to 1939, using the Solar Observation Outpost on Praxian, with a contingent of loyal Jaffa to sink the Achilles, with the Alpha Gate on board before it could reach the United States. However, the Colonel Mitchell of an alternate timeline where Ball's plan had succeeded was waiting and ambushed Ball's forces alongside Boson when they emerged through the Stargate. Spotting Mitchell, Ball could only stare at him in shock before Mitchell shot Ball in the head with a Thompson submarine gun, finally killing him. The death of the real Ball in 1939 and his clone brought a final end to both Ball and the Goa'uld system lords. In the alternate reality, during an extraction of his clone, the real Ball went back in time to 1939 to change history by stopping the Stargate on Earth from ever reaching America, which ultimately resulted in Stargate Command and Stargate program never existing. When Ball got to Earth, he arrived on the ship Achilles and killed the crew of the ship carrying the Stargate, and he set a bomb before leaving through the Stargate to build a new empire in that time. Mitchell's grandfather managed to dump the bomb overboard where it exploded harmlessly, but the ship ended up trapped in the ice of the Arctic, allowing Ball's plan to work to officially change the timeline. In this alternate timeline, Ball, retaining the knowledge of his previous timeline, became the leader of the Goa'uld, using his knowledge of the other timeline to anticipate his enemies' moves and destroy them, as well as gaining the support of the other system lords. Ball also used his knowledge in other ways, by promising the establishment of a free Jaffa nation. Ball was able to sway Teal'c to his side as his first prime. He also made Katesh, who was still in control of Vala, having never been extracted from his queen. Ball went on to attack Earth with a massive fleet, but, having been impressed with the humans in the other timeline, advocated that they be not slaughtered and enslaved outright, but instead deceived. However, Katesh, suspicious of Ball's uncanny knowledge of Earth and how he had anticipated his enemies' moves, turned on him with the ultimate goal of seizing power for herself and stabbed him with a sword. However, she kept him alive long enough to interrogate him via a hand device, with Ball, who was in a weakened state and even near death, disclosing everything that he knew. When Teal'c returned, Ball hoped to be freed, only for Teal'c to realize that Katesh would kill him. This was proven true when Katesh instantly turned on Teal'c before removing the sword from Ball, which resulted in Ball's death straight away. But after Ball splitting in half as well, SG-1, who had managed to escape the changes to the timeline by traveling in a wormhole back to Earth at the moment history changed, managed to use his device and the Stargate to travel back to 1929, which was the closest they could get, to stop him. Although, only Mitchell made it through. Colonel Mitchell was able to stop Ball and fix the timeline back to the correct course, with the alternate timeline version of Ball, the clone, and the real Ball all dead. So what do you guys think of everything there is to know about the Goa'uld system lord Ball? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't already, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, join the Sith Citadel Discord, links in the description, and consider becoming a join member to support the channel. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.